Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, October the 7th, 2024. Now, my main topic is going to be Melania Trump. She has been in the news recently. She has, I think, got a memoir that is just coming out, and one reason why this memoir is getting a lot of coverage is because she's talked about abortion and how she believes in a woman's right to choose. So I thought it might be a good idea to look at what's going on in her horoscope at the moment, and perhaps also to consider what's happening in her chart around the time of the election. I might also look at the chart of Barron Trump, her son, her and Donald's son, and ask the question, how is the election day going to occur for them? That sort of might be something interesting to look at. So as far as the overall structure of this video, I'm going to start off by looking at the main events for the week. There are a couple of events which I think are important this week that I think I need to talk about. And then I'm going to look at Melania Trump, and I think probably Barron Trump as well. And then I'm going to do an I Ching reading for the week, where I'm going to sort of look at the week from four perspectives: a general perspective, the perspective of money, the perspective of career, and finally I'm going to look at relationships. Just a reminder, the I Ching reading is pretty optional. It only covers people who actually watch the video, who actually watch the I Ching section of the video. So if you don't want your I Ching read, just don't watch the last part of the video, because it won't apply to you. It only applies to people who actually watch the I Ching section. So really, if you don't want the reading, you don't have to have it. Okay, so let's look at what's going on this week. Usual reminder: if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoy the video, then I would be really happy if you were to subscribe. Okay, so let's see what's going on. So there, of course, top right is Melania Trump, and so let's see what's happening. So here, that's Donald's chart, but we won't be looking at his chart quite yet. Let's look at the start of the week. So this is the position of the planets at midnight on Monday, October the 7th, and you can see that the moon is very much waxing. So the moon is, we've just had a new moon in Libra, and now the moon is starting to move into Sagittarius. So that reminds us that it is at the beginning of a lunar cycle, and the waxing moon tends to be more fortunate from the waning moon. We can now start to see the moon as the week progresses. The moon is getting bigger, provided there aren't any clouds in the sky, and of course provided that it's not in the middle of the day, but at night we can start to see the moon. And so perhaps if we've got new projects, now might be the time to start to reveal them, as we can see this growing moon. Now, on Tuesday, we have two events which I think are perhaps worthy of note. On Tuesday, that's October the 8th, we have two trines. We have Venus trine Mars, and we have Mercury trine Jupiter. So there's Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Cancer. So Venus trine Mars, I mean, it's a nice aspect. Venus and Mars are the two planets of relationships. So when they come together, it really makes people perhaps attractive. There's a certain attractiveness to it, and it is in Scorpio. So there is something quite intense about that Venus trine Mars, but it is a trine. It's not a square. I think Venus square Mars is more noticeable, more dynamic, perhaps a little more stressful. But I think with Venus trine Mars, there may be an sort of easy charisma. And with that Venus trine Mars, there's a reminder, but we still have this grand trine in water signs. So, there is Venus trine Mars, and Venus and Mars are both trine Saturn. Okay, Venus Mars, that trine to Saturn, it's starting to fade, but I do think sort of Monday, Tuesday, we can still regard there as being a grand trine in water signs in operation. So from an emotional perspective, things are flowing, but because of Saturn's involvement, perhaps we have a chance to control our feelings, and we don't have to allow our feelings to go all over the place, or perhaps the word to use is harness. So the power of the emotions can perhaps be harnessed to achieve particular things. And so I suppose with Venus trine Mars, we might see that in terms of being persuasive, using one's attractiveness to get results. And at the same time, Mercury is trine Jupiter. There is Mercury in Libra trining Jupiter in Gemini. It's a very nice aspect, Mercury trine Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter, they flow. It's about communication. It gives us a different idea from the Venus trine Mars in Scorpio. This is Mercury trine Jupiter in Gemini. So we've got a lot of air and we've got a lot of earth. So in a way, Tuesday is a day when we can balance things. Balance the air, balance the earth, and balance the air and balance the water. I suppose if you're into Jungian psychology, there is the emphasis on the rational axis, because I think according to Jung, the air signs and the water signs were on the rational axis, whereas the fire signs and the earth signs were on the irrational axis. And I suppose you could say that the rationality of air and water is perhaps it's about either thinking or feeling things through. Rationality is about using who we are to work out what is right. So we can use our heart to work out what is right with a Venus trine Mars, or we can use our head to work out what is right. That is, that would be the air signs. With the earth signs and the fire signs, there's no working out, if I've got Jung right. The earth signs, it's apparent, it's obvious, it's right in front of us. With the fire signs, it's just straight intuition. We don't have to work it out, it's just there. But with the air signs and the water signs, we can work it out, or we can feel it out. And so that might be how we can sort of relate the Mercury trine Jupiter, which is an airy trine involving Gemini and Libra, and the Venus Mars trine, indeed grand trine, which is a watery trine, grand trine. And so we take our time, we think it through, we feel it through. Now, moving a bit further on in the week, and Wednesday and Saturday, we have some important stations. In other words, from the Earth's perspective, two planets come to a standstill. On Wednesday, Jupiter comes to a standstill. Jupiter is retrograde, because goes stationary retrograde. On Saturday, Pluto goes stationary retrograde. Stationary direct. So Pluto has been moving retrograde, and it comes to a halt and starts to move direct. That's on Saturday. Wednesday, Jupiter's going direct. It comes to a halt. It starts going retrograde. And so when you've got two planets changing direction, it's kind of like there's a change of pace. We might have got used to things moving in a particular way, and then suddenly they start moving in a different way. Now, I will be looking at the impact of these stations later in the week. I'll certainly be having a video on Jupiter and Pluto's station. I think that the Pluto station, I think, is particularly important. I mean, I know that, in a sort of personal sense, maybe Jupiter is a more important planet than Pluto, but I suppose on a collective sense, that Pluto stationing is important. Pluto had been in Aquarius. It started going retrograde. It went out of Aquarius, went back into Capricorn, and then it stations. There you can see Pluto doesn't get very far back into Capricorn. Only 29. What is that? 39. Where does it exact degree? I think it's 29:39 that it goes. That goes stationary retrograde. Yeah, 29:39. Capricorn, there's that point where it comes to a standstill, and then after that it starts going forward, and next month it moves into Aquarius, and so that I think is something that I really do need to consider. And then yes, we've got Jupiter coming to a halt, and that does mean that Jupiter loses strength and moving retrograde. So we'll look at that later on in the week, and look at the sort of precise point where Jupiter goes stationary retrograde. And that's it. I would have said those are the main events this week as I see it. So now I just want to quickly look at some trumps. And I'll start off by looking at Melania Trump's horoscope. I mean, she has been in the news. She has just got this memoir out, and she's just getting a lot of headlines because she seems to be sort of contradicting her husband. I think it's been pointed out that first ladies tend to be a little more progressive sometimes than their husbands in terms of issues like abortion. This is not particularly unusual. So I think an example. I think people use the example. Perhaps I don't know. George Bush Jr.'s wife. I think we don't really know much about her, but I think she was more progressive than he was. And so this is perhaps something not exactly unexpected. Now, as far as Melania's chart is concerned, Melania, we don't have a time of birth for Melania. So when we see her moon, it's just possible that it's not in Capricorn, that it's late in Sagittarius. But I think there's a very, very high chance she was born with the moon in Capricorn. Perhaps if she was born just after midnight, her moon would have been in Sagittarius. But I think we can be reasonably confident that she has got the moon in Capricorn. And what is perhaps exceptional about her chart is how much Earth she's got in it. I mean, she's got moon in Capricorn, Sun in Taurus, Saturn in Taurus, Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Taurus. So she is a very earthy woman. She understands her priorities, and I would guess that she came to America and she was thinking about financial security and perhaps finding someone who could give her financial security, and that was possibly a big priority. And that moon in Capricorn, there's something very no nonsense about moon in Capricorn. It perhaps doesn't want to concern itself with with trivialities, and you almost think that perhaps her husband's political career. That might just be his hobby, and that's something she just has to kind of go along with it. But that Earth, I think, is a very important dynamic in terms of her relationship with Donald. I mean, if you look at Trump's chart, Trump has got no Earth. Absolutely no Earth, no planets in Capricorn, no planets in Taurus, no planets in Virgo. So that's kind of strange, isn't it? So Melania Trump was choosing her husband because she wanted security. That was what it was all about. So she chose someone in her quest for security who had no Earth. In fact, from his perspective, he was going to want a wife who, at some psychological level, gave him some grounding, or appeared to give him some grounding. He might not have really recognized this at the time, but naturally he would have been attracted to a woman who had loads of Earth in her chart. So there's a sort of a natural, I suppose it's a kind of a meeting of opposites in some respects. You could say his sun in Gemini really was, Sun trine Jupiter in Gemini was really attracted to someone who had all of this Earth. So going back to Melania's chart, and there is the question, what is she going through at the moment? It's very difficult to know because we don't have a time of birth, and it is kind of annoying that we don't have this time of birth. So let's anyway see what's happening right now. And then I'm going to just look at what's happening at the time of the election. So here is we'll put Melania's chart in the middle, and we'll put the beginning of the week's planets right now. So when she is when she's coming up with her memoir, and she's getting this blast of publicity, what exactly is happening? Well, to an extent, it's a bit difficult to tell because we don't have a time of birth. But what I do find a bit interesting is the position of a planet Uranus. So one thing that Melania Trump does have is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Taurus. Now, Mercury and Venus as a pair are actually quite nice. It's quite nice having a Mercury-Venus conjunction. It's I suppose someone who you could say, in her case, I suppose being a former model, that at some level she was able to, Mercury conjunct Venus, was able to communicate her attractiveness. That's one way you could see it. And it's perhaps fairly charismatic in a very sort of down-to-earth way. Now, Mercury-Venus conjunction, you could also say that it might represent sort of artistic skill. I mean, I suppose if I was looking at her chart without knowing anything about her, there could be something, very down to earth about what she does. I mean, I suppose from an artistic point of view, you could say Mercury conjunct Venus. I might get it completely wrong and suggest she might be into gardening. To my knowledge, she's not into gardening at all. But she certainly perhaps has ideas about the way things should look. One remembers that sort of rather bizarre White House Christmas scene where she had these very strange Christmas trees, which was sort of looked a bit surreal, and that was her Christmas show. But anyway, we're interested in the Mercury-Venus midpoint here, because her Mercury-Venus midpoint, is about 25 Taurus. So she's got Uranus on her Mercury-Venus midpoint. And so, okay, she's got this memoir she's come out with. I assume that she's been helped with it, and Uranus is on her Mercury-Venus midpoint. So Uranus is about doing something a bit strange, doing something unusual. And so I think when we see Melania Trump getting all this attention at the moment, and also because of her views and her views on abortion and women's reproductive rights, that's Uranus on her Mercury-Venus conjunction. Really, that's Uranus perhaps pushing her out into the limelight, and her getting all this attention. I think that is the main thing. I don't see much else going on. Just off the top of my head. Now, she has got, with her Venus in Taurus, so Pluto is going stationary retrograde at around 29 Capricorn, around 29:39 Capricorn. So Pluto is stationing as close as it can to the trine of her Venus. So I suppose you could say that Venus might be representative of women in general, of sort of reproductive rights, and Pluto trine Venus, and might well be bringing that out into the open, perhaps indicating that, maybe she's different. We also, with Uranus, is quite close. That Uranus trine Pluto that is in the sky, that is hitting her Venus as well. So maybe again that's why she's getting so much attention. And then there is the question, what is going on at the time of a presidential election? I mean, it must mean something to her. I don't think it means as much to her as it means to her husband. I'm guessing with her natal chart that she will see the presidential election in her own particular way, and I think that there will perhaps be a certain amount of ambivalence as far as the result is concerned. But turning to, let's just compare her chart with the election chart. So this is her chart compared with the evening of November the 5th. So, what is she kind of experiencing on the evening of November the 5th? Now, with Melania, we do not know where her moon is. Her moon could be anywhere from 0 degrees Capricorn to, I don't know, about 12 or 13 degrees Capricorn. The noon position of her moon is 6 degrees Capricorn. So at the time of the election, at sort of on the evening of November the 5th, the moon is at 6 degrees Capricorn. So she's actually got a lunar return on the day of the election, okay, it could be the day after the election. So around that time, she's got the lunar return. And of course, a lunar return can perhaps represent a change. Every time you have a lunar return, every lunar return perhaps represents the month ahead. And so with every lunar return, that's sort of talking about the new month, what the new month is going to be like. And I just think that it is potentially quite significant that she's got that lunar return. And also looking at the North Node, is at 5:55 Aries. So the transiting North Node is opposition her Uranus. In other words, the South Node is opposition her Uranus. So this is a time where, to an extent, you get a feeling she's going to have to go backwards. She's going to have to revisit old ground. Her uniqueness, which I suppose might be Uranus in Libra, might be revisited. And, normally I wouldn't worry too much about a transit to Uranus. Uranus is a transpersonal planet. Everyone born in 1970 will have their Uranus at around five Libra. But in this case, it is quite personal, and I suppose maybe we get the idea perhaps of a refocus on what makes her different. And I suppose she's an immigrant from Slovenia. I suppose people in America don't know much about Slovenia very often, and you could say that might coincide with her husband getting re-elected. Now, as you know, I do believe that Trump will be re-elected. I probably should put out a video very soon explaining why I think Trump is going to win the election. And, maybe that's an interpretation of how the South Node is, what it means for the South Node to be conjunct Uranus. If Trump lost the election, he would just fade away. And I suppose she would fade away to an extent. There's no way he's going to run again. And there wouldn't be so much focus on her. But maybe there's a hint there, but I don't want to put too much emphasis onto that. And again, we have Uranus is not going to move very far. So Uranus is still on the Mercury-Venus conjunction. So things are really being churned up there. So, by the way, what does it mean to have Uranus on the Mercury-Venus conjunction? I'm just going to tell you sort of what Ebertin says. I suspect this won't be very appropriate, but Ebertin's view of Reinhold Ebertin combination of stellar influences, his view of Uranus on the Mercury-Venus midpoint, he says, inventive ability, the gift of getting ideas, an appreciation of the necessity of reform, a public speaker full of ideas and quick at repartee. I don't know quite what that says about the election result, but I suppose it does perhaps remind us that she's feeling it in terms of her memoir coming out. She is being interviewed with that Uranus on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. So I think the Uranus is the Uranus being aspected by the South Node is certainly interesting. Then there's Mercury. So on the eve of the election, as the results I assume are coming through, Mercury is at 4 degrees 36 Sagittarius, and this is going to be opposition. It's going to be opposition her Mars. Now, you might say that Mars is her husband, and that Mercury is starting to make that opposition to her Mars. So there's Mars in Gemini. So Mercury opposition Mars is quite a stressful aspect. Now, you could say that that's quite argumentative. Now, if you are looking for perhaps evidence that Trump is going to lose, you might say, which I don't think we can use this as sufficient evidence, but if you wanted evidence he's going to lose, you can imagine transiting Mercury opposition Mars, then, arguments with her husband. Her husband is probably not going to be in a very good mood, is he? On the other hand, she might not be in a good mood, having to move back into the White House, because I wonder what she really wants, because I suspect she's not telling us what she wants, but there is a lot of agitation at the time of the election for her with that Mercury opposition Mars, and I suppose how you read that Mercury opposition Mars may kind of depend what you think is going to happen, because I can kind of see two scenarios. I can see a scenario where her husband is storming around, where Donald is storming around, he's annoyed, he's just lost the election. Or I can see an alternative scenario where she is annoyed. She's, not exactly being over the moon that her husband has got in, because it's just more stress, and perhaps she wanted to just get on with her life, and that was what she was planning on doing. Now, turning to her solar arc directions, so Melania is, how old is she? She's 50, she's 54. So if we move every planet in her horoscope 54 degrees, we see her chart here, and this is her solar arc directions, and so we're moving every single planet 54 degrees approximately, to see if anything interesting is happening. And one thing I notice is the North Node. So the North South Node. Her North Node is at sort of 10 degrees Pisces. So if we direct the North Node about 54 degrees, we direct it to her North Node to 2 degrees Taurus. So her directed nodal axis is at 2 degrees Taurus, which is there it is. North Node, South Node is on South Node is in Scorpio, and this North Node is picking up on her Sun-Jupiter opposition. So in her natal chart, she has Sun at 5 degrees Taurus, opposition Jupiter at 0 degrees Scorpio. So there is that Sun-Jupiter opposition. She perhaps has big ideas. I mean, I think you can see that with that materialism, Sun in Taurus, opposition Jupiter. There are things she wants, and I suppose she might not have ever really been quite satisfied with what she was born with, perhaps with what was available in her native country. And Jupiter wanted to, I suppose, take things further. And the North Node is therefore on her Sun-Jupiter midpoint. So North Node can be seen as very much associations with people. And so from a directed point of view, it's a time when more people are coming into her life, perhaps, because the North Node can be about contacts and people who are perhaps larger than life. And I would have thought, on balance, probably that North Node on her Sun-Jupiter midpoint would perhaps gravitate towards something fortunate associations, and that might have something to do with what's going on in her husband's political career. And what is perhaps more interesting is her directed Uranus. So there is Uranus, her directed Uranus is at 2756 Scorpio, and it's moving towards the opposition of Venus. Now, we don't know exactly where that Venus is, because we don't know her time of birth. But broadly speaking, she's got directed Uranus opposition her Venus. Now, solar arc directions are quite slow. So, there's going to be no real way of distinguishing between what's happening, say, now, when her book comes out, and what happens at the time of the election, particularly as we don't know her time of birth. Now, we could see that directed Uranus opposition her Venus, again, her views on reproductive rights getting a lot of attention. I think that some journalists have been sort of very surprised by what's been going on with the launch of her book. And so Venus, you could say, reproductive rights, Uranus opposition her Venus, there are surprises there. You could also see Uranus on opposition Venus as perhaps being about relationships and some of the disruptions perhaps in her relationship with her husband. Where is the relationship going? And there's a lot of tension here. And I suppose there would be tension either way. I mean, there would be tension, I suppose, if he loses the election, then Donald Trump, I suppose, to an extent, is retiring from public life, and she's left with him, and she's married to him, this man who is, I suppose, inevitably must be fading from the public eye. Or She's married to this man who has just been re-elected, as I think he will be, who's just been re-elected, and I think that in itself could cause its problems. There's her, she wants to be independent, Uranus opposition Venus, and it's kind of rather disruptive, isn't it? Then I just quickly wanted to look at Barron Trump. I've looked at Barron Trump very recently. I think it was a couple of days ago. But I just want to look at what's going on for him at the time of the election. So there's Barron Trump's horoscope, and I just want to look at his transits. So here are his transits. I think the most important transit for Barron Trump at the end of a year is Saturn. Saturn is at 1246 Pisces. So he has got, at the moment, transiting Saturn across his ascendant. And transiting Saturn is hitting his Mercury. So is this really about what's happening to his father? I mean, I suppose he's just gone to university. I don't know what it's like him going. Has he gone to the University of New York? So that just might be his experience of going to university. It must be a strange environment. You can imagine the kind of security he has, but he's trying to be a student. I don't know how that works. But in a way, it's quite a difficult time for him. With Saturn conjunct his Mercury in the last months of the year, it's not easy. He doesn't strike me as being particularly happy. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't notice it. Maybe these transits aren't such a big deal when you're 18 years old. And he has, roughly at the time of the election, his North Node return. So the North Node return is pretty generic. It happened. It will. This is his first North Node return. It will happen at around this age. I mean, he's sort of 18 and a half. So around that time, everyone will get a North Node return. So in a way, that is not such an important event. Though his moon is at 0 degrees Sagittarius, which is that's important because he's going to have Mars. Now this is interesting, actually. There is a Mars trine Mercury at the time of the election. Remember, Mars goes into Leo, I think, on the day of the election. And I do actually think that's quite important because the moment Mars goes into Leo, it makes a mutual reception to the Sun, because Mars is in Leo, the sign of the Sun, and Mars is in Scorpio, the sign of the sign ruled by Mars. So Sun-Mars mutual reception at the time of the election. To my mind, that is a potential signature of a Trump victory. Reason I think it's a signature of a Trump victory is because you've got a male candidate against a female candidate, and so there is a kind of the emphasis on the male. The Mars, a universal significator of masculinity, is in mutual reception with the Sun, which is another universal significator of masculinity, and they're in mutual reception with each other, and so that would favour a male candidate if a man is up against a woman in an election. That is certainly a signature of a Trump victory. It's not, of course, the only thing we look for, but yes, we've got this Sun Mercury trine, which is about 4 degrees apart. Now look at Barron Trump's chart. He has got Moon trine Saturn 4 degrees apart. So we've got Mars exactly trine his Sun. we've got Mercury exactly trine his Saturn. Now, I do think that is a very interesting aspect. And from his perspective, I would not have said that it was necessarily a difficult aspect. Okay, you could say that Mars is starting to apply to a conjunction of his Saturn. And that would happen about a week after the election. But the immediate aspect is Mars trine his moon, and Mercury trine his Saturn. There's a certain seriousness about it, but there's also a sense of sort of something happening. And so I think that is an aspect that I do find very interesting. Also, look at Venus. Venus is very close to his midheaven, and I suppose these aspects, with these aspects, I don't think you can say for sure, just looking at an aspect, whether this means his father is going to win. But I thought I would just point out these aspects, because there are a few aspects going on, transits going on, which I think we should take note of. Maybe you've got some ideas about how these aspects might manifest. Maybe you can put those in the comments. Anyway, that's it for Melania and Barron, and now I want to look at the week from the perspective of the I Ching. So remember, you don't have to watch this I Ching reading if you don't want to. It doesn't apply to you if you don't watch it. It only applies to those who watch this section of this video. And this I Ching reading will be divided into 4 sections. There'll be a general section, a section on money, a section on career, and then a section on relationships. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, October the 7th, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 24, which is about return. So this week is about coming back. We've gone somewhere, we've moved in a particular direction, we move as far as we can, and at a certain stage we decide that it's time to return, perhaps returning to the starting point. And it's the kind of return that is completely honourable. It's not like a return where we think we've failed or anything like that, or we're returning in disgrace. No, we've tried something, we've moved in a particular direction, we've perhaps found out what we needed to find out, we've done what we have to do, and then it's just time to come back. And this hexagram does have a moving line. The bottom line moves. Now, when you've got this bottom line moving, if you look at this hexagram, it's got an unbroken line at the bottom. So that's perhaps indicating that the action is taking place at a fairly early stage. And so this is return really soon after we've started. And it may be that we've started a venture, we've started work on the venture, or we've started moving in a particular direction. And at a quite an early stage, we decide, well, we know what we're doing. We understand. We've seen the picture. We're now going to return. So it's perhaps about coming back early. Perhaps because we realise a task is too difficult, or we perhaps think there's something else that needs to be done. But we're not going to move too far. And if we are making a mistake, perhaps we've gone off our path and we have started to make a few small mistakes, we realise at a pretty early stage. And the I Ching really says there's no blame. We make small mistakes, but because we're able to correct ourselves so quickly, it's not a problem. And because the bottom line moves, we move to a different hexagram, which is hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. And this is a hexagram where all the lines are broken. And so, having made our mistake, or perhaps a mistake, or perhaps we just had to investigate things, we return, and after that, we're not going to do anything. The receptive is passive. It's not a time to be taking the initiative, to be, the opposite of the receptive. Hexagram 2 is hexagram number 1, which is the creative. So it's not about being creative, initiating things. This week is, in the end, going to be about, I think, just watching. See what other people have to say. It's not for us to make the big initiatives. Let other people take the risks. And it's also a sense that we perhaps just feel that we don't have enough information to take further initiatives. We've made a small initiative. We decided it really wasn't worth seeing it through. And now we're just waiting. We want to see how things pan out. And I think that is perhaps the right approach, particularly towards the end of a week. Just don't do anything of any massive, that is creatively of major significance. And I suppose that ties in astrologically with what's going on. Jupiter is going stationary retrograde. Pluto is going stationary direct. Though from the Earth's perspective, Jupiter and Pluto are at a standstill. And so, sure, they're at a standstill. They don't know what's going on. We don't know what's going on. And so I think that the receptive is just giving us an idea about how best to behave. Now, as far as money is concerned, so in terms of money, I think at the moment we perhaps have ideas about money. It may be, of course, that money is not relevant to you. It's not something you're concerned about at the moment. But if it is of relevance, it just may be that you're starting to think about money. You're about to consider perhaps doing something with money, or you're perhaps starting to think about spending money, or perhaps you're even in the process of starting to spend money in a new direction. And with a return, you may actually question what you're doing. You may think, okay, you've spent some money maybe, but do you really want to keep spending money in this direction? Maybe not. And so you perhaps decide, well, let's reconsider the situation. Or perhaps it may be about making a small financial mistake. So at the beginning of a week, you do something with money, or you buy something, and you decide that wasn't the right thing to do. Now, return could literally be return. So if you bought something which is relatively expensive, maybe on Amazon or something, you know the kind of thing where you wondered, really, should you have spent that amount of money? You're not absolutely sure. You bought it, you've ordered it, and then 24 is return. You just decide, well, maybe not. I don't really need it. And so you're going to send it back. So if you have ordered something from Amazon or some other place where you can return it, I think there's a good chance that you are going to want to return it, because you'll look at it and you'll say, well, did I need to spend that amount of money? Could I have just saved the money? Did I really need this item? It's kind of like it was done on a whim, but no harm done. And of course, that's a great thing about being able to return things. No harm done. And of course, the bottom line moving is about making perhaps a small mistake, and no harm is done. And it could be money, whatever you're thinking about spending money and deciding to spend money on. You can always go back on it. Well, not always. Sometimes you make an agreement to spend money and you can't go back on it because maybe there's a contract of some nature. But if you have recently decided to spend money, or in a process of spending money, return does indicate that you perhaps may want to reverse your decision. And this moves to hexagram number 2, which is the receptive, and this this gives us the idea of perhaps biding one's time. You know, it's not perhaps a time to be spending money. In terms of money, be very cautious. You know, you might feel you want to sort of take some initiative with money, offer money, or agree to spend money, or perhaps you're thinking about buying something, but it's not a time for taking financial initiatives. It's a time for just kind of just understand. You have to understand what's going on. You need to watch, observe. Don't feel you have to take any initiatives. Gather information. Use your feelings, use your brain, and try to work out what is going on. And maybe later next week you can make a decision. You know, that's not this week starting on October the 7th. It's the next week starting. Mid-October. So it's not really the time to make financial decisions. It's a time for working out what to do, but not actually committing yourself. Now, in terms of career and business, it's a fairly similar picture with return. We may be sort of experimenting a bit. We might feel that we want to do something new, or we might be perhaps exploring a new employment opportunity, or if we've already got a job, we might be starting to engage in a new activity, and it's kind of exploratory. We've kind of never done it before. Or from a business perspective, we might be wanting to branch out in a new area. We're considering this. We're trying to work out whether it might be a good thing. And we move so far, but only up to a point. And as we gather more and more information, we start to think, well, maybe this is not the right thing to be doing. At least it's not the right thing to be doing right now. And so there is a sense of reconsideration, and that might be even if you're sort of applying for a new job. You perhaps applied for a new job, or you've started a process of applying, and you maybe have second thoughts, and that does give us the idea of return. And at work, if you are working or in your business at the beginning of a week, it's possible you make a small mistake. It's just a misjudgment, or something sounded interesting, you pursued an opportunity, and then you realize, that wasn't the right thing, it's not going to work. But it's not a big deal. It's maybe ever so slightly embarrassing, perhaps, but it doesn't matter. It's quite easy to just say, okay, I'm going to leave that until later. Perhaps it's just an area that you decide you just don't want to bother with. And so you change your decision, you return to the status quo, and return, we got a moving line, so we shift to a new hexagram, which is the receptive. So at the end of a week, towards the end of a week, as the week progresses, there's nothing that has to be done. There are things that you need to work out. Let other people have their ideas. Let other people take the initiative. See where it goes. You don't have to be part of it. And maybe that's also about letting other people make mistakes. You're not going to be the one who's made a mistake. You perhaps almost made a mistake at the beginning of a week. You're not going to make a mistake. Let other people perhaps take the risks. Okay, maybe you should try to stop them taking risks, but you don't have to actually do anything yourself. And it may actually be that in terms of being successful, it is best to do nothing. Let things come to you. Don't be the one that's putting your neck on the line. Let things come to you, then you can decide how you want to proceed. And that might be the best approach. And finally, there is relationships. So with relationships, we start with return. I mean, I don't know what you're doing with relationships. I don't know this could apply to any kind of relationship, but with 24 return, you may be tempted to sort of take some kind of initiative, make some kind of overture towards someone. You perhaps try to be friendly, you try to reach out to someone, you change your pattern to some extent. With return, you move in a certain direction, perhaps towards someone. In the process, you start to find out about them, and you start to work out, whether or not they can be trusted, whether or not this person you can spend time with them, and you gather information, and then you decide, well, maybe not, and you withdraw. And there is a certain sense of withdrawal, and it's not a big deal. It's hardly noticeable, but there is a possibility that you change your mind about someone, and you go back to your starting point. It could, of course, work in the other way. If you're in a long-term relationship and you've got you've got bad feelings about the whole thing, and return might be, in fact, that you start to move away from someone who you've been with for a long time, and then return could be about returning to someone. So it kind of depends on the situation, but it's like there's a deviation in your pattern of relationships to begin with, and this deviation, all things being equal, is probably a mistake, or perhaps you're being too impulsive, and you make a deviation and you have second thoughts, and then you return to the way it was before. You return to the status quo. Hopefully it wasn't the status quo antebellum, but at some level there is a return, and status quo antebellum, that is the status quo before the war, isn't it? Isn't that right? So anyway, you perhaps feel it's time to return, and then this hexagram transitions, and it transitions to hexagram number 2, which is receptive. So, by the end of a week, you perhaps take the view that in terms of relationships, there's nothing you have to do. It's not about you taking the initiative. It's not about you trying to make things happen. It's about other people. Watch their behavior. What are they trying to do? Where are they trying to push you? What are they suggesting? Let other people take the initiative. Then you can make a judgment at a later stage. And perhaps by watching other people take action or try to take action, you'll be in a better position to make a decision, to make a judgment. And so it's a great time for sort of observation. If you observe someone for long enough, you'll start to get a good understanding of who they are, whether or not they can be trusted, whether you want to spend time with them, or perhaps whether you just don't want this person in your life. So you don't feel that you have to do anything at the end of a week in terms of relationships. So that's it. That's the week starting on October the 7th. I think it was a fairly brief and undramatic video. If you did enjoy this video, though, or you felt the video was useful, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. It does make a difference to the channel. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.